Okay, we are going to bring this meeting to order on January 21st, 2025. Roll call, please.
Counselor Beachide. Here. Counselor Berggren.
Here.
Counselor Martin.
Here.
Counselor Frazier. Counselor Stancliffe. Here. Mayor Palmer.
Here. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any agenda adjustments?
We do have an agenda adjustment tonight, Mr. Mayor. I received a phone call. Mr. Tate is unable to do the presentation that he would have tonight. And so he asked if we could reschedule, and we will bring that back at a later time.
Okay. So that was the presentation by Sean Tate.
Yes.
So anything from the public?
We did not have anybody sign up for public comment.
Okay. Item 6, public hearing, ordinance number 25-02, an ordinance of the city of Gold Hill amending Title I of the Gold Hill Municipal Code, amending certain fees for violations. Lily, can you give us?
Yes,
And
so
that's on,
I will bring that up for us, and it's just one moment for me.
there it is.
Okay, Mayor and Council, you'll see before you ordinance number 25-02. And in our Gold Hill Municipal Code, Title I, Section 20 was last updated in 1987. It set the penalties for generic violation of the municipal code, basically about $25 up to $500, depending on the violation. And it is grossly outdated with the cost of doing code enforcement and accountability for where things are at. And so this is an ordinance that is essentially replacing that section of the code. So sections 010, 020, 025, 030, 040, and 050. And I would like to read this portion. I'm going to just read it because there's a couple edits here different than where we had. And so I'm going to recommend that I actually read the ordinance in full, because what I posted on the website has amendments here. But if I read it in full tonight, they're not enough to require it another one. But if we read it in full, the action can be taken on still tonight. So if the council doesn't mind, I'm going to read the whole thing. And what I will tell you, the main difference is we took out the specific limits of what the fine will be. And this ordinance is essentially saying there will be penalties, there will be fines, but they will be set by resolution. And instead of there being a limit here at all, it is simply that they will come back by resolution. And so I will, this is an ordinance that our legal counsel had recommended after reviewing other communities. And so this is the first step, is adopting the ordinance. We will bring back a resolution that will have the fine levels in it. So this is simply changing it to repealing the general penalty portion of chapter 1.20 and in its entirety, and replacing it with this code attached. So ordinance number 25-02, an ordinance of the city of Gold Hill. Actually, you know, it would be appropriate to have a motion to read the ordinance first reading. And we don't have to do it by title only, because I'm going to read the full thing because of the amendments, but it would be appropriate to start with the motion for the first reading.
Make a motion for the first reading of ordinance number 25-02.
I second that.
Any other questions? Okay, I have a second. So go ahead and
So we need a.
roll call.
Once again, the second came from. Thank
Stankliff.
you. Roll call, Counselor Beachide,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren,
Yes.
Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Counselor Fraser. Counselor Stancliff.
Yes.
Ordinance number 25-02, an ordinance of the city of Gold Hill amending Title I of the Gold Hill Municipal Code, amending certain fees for violations. Whereas the Gold Hill Municipal Code Title I, Section 20 has not been updated since 1987 and is substantially outdated. And whereas accountability for adherence to the Gold Hill Municipal Code encourages the health and safety of our community. Now therefore be it resolved by the Gold Hill City Council, the Gold Hill Municipal Code Title I, Chapter 1.20, general penalty shall be repealed in its entirety and replaced as follows. Sections 1.20010, violation, infraction. Section 1.20.020, violation, penalty. Section 1.20.025, failure to appear. Section 1.20.030, no right to jury trial for infraction. Section 1.20.040, enforcement. Section 1.20.050, schedule of fines. 1.20.010, violation infraction. Any person, firm, or corporation which violates any provision of any ordinance of the city shall be guilty of committing an infraction as defined in this chapter. 1.20.020, violation penalty. A person commits an infraction by violating provisions of this code and shall not suffer any disability or legal disadvantage based upon conviction thereof. The penalty for committing, oh, sorry, the computer is giving me a notice there. The penalty for committing an infraction shall be a fine. However, each and every day during any portion of which any infraction is committed, continues, or is permitted by any such person is a separate violation subject to a separate fine, and such person shall be punished accordingly and in the discretion of the judge. The city shall have the burden of proving the infraction by a preponderance of the evidence, and the defendant may not be required to be a witness at the trial of such infraction. At any trial involving an infraction, the city attorney shall not appear unless the defendant is represented by an attorney. Further, at any such trial, defense counsel shall not be provided at public expense. Section 1.20.025, failure to appear. Any person, firm, corporation, or entity who fails to appear at the time, date, and place set for appearance for violation of any provision of any ordinance of the city shall be guilty of committing an infraction as hereinafter defined. Section 1.20.030, no right to jury trial for infraction. Neither party shall have the right to a jury trial at the trial of any infraction. Section 1.20.040, enforcement. Nothing contained in this chapter shall preclude the right of a party to compel the enforcement of a city ordinance as provided by state law. Section 1.20.050, schedule of fines. The fee schedule for the general penalties shall be set by resolution. Section 3, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect 30 days after passage. And then the final portion is the foregoing ordinance was first read by title only in accordance with the city charter on the blank day of 2025 and duly passed and approved by the city council of the city of Gold Hill on blank day of 2025. So this is the ordinance read in full. The council can ask questions and anything else like that. We can also, because this was posted 7 days in advance, also can move forward with a second reading tonight. And a vote of adoption if the council chooses, or they can choose not to. And we can set it out to the next meeting and have a second reading that night. But by reading it in full tonight, that took care of the amendments that weren't, if you would like to see the exact changes, the first version that I posted online and sent out had up to, but not exceeding $500. Because the recommendation is that this ordinance sets the violation by resolution. Our attorney recommended taking out any numeric number until you bring back the resolution at a future time. And so that is the ordinance before council's consideration at this time.
Well, you answered that question, why there was no amount on all these infractions. So, council.
Every day that somebody is in violation and they don't take care of an issue, each day is a different violation. Our current code, I believe, says the same thing, but I can pull it up to verify. They could face up to a $500 fine every day if that were the amount. So the city cannot impose that fine. The city would send the person to the justice court in Jackson County that is representing us in a municipal court capacity through an intergovernmental agreement. And the judge would hear the evidence that the city would have to present of the violation. And in a court of law, you would have heard different levels of proof. So you've heard beyond a reasonable doubt. You've heard different levels that is. In this situation, it's set under Section 2 penalty. It says it is a preponderance of the evidence. So the majority of the evidence, the preponderance of the evidence would show there's an infraction. And so it's on to the city to prove that preponderance of evidence. And the judge would weigh in according to the violation and find if there's a level there. Now, we haven't determined the financial amount yet. We'll bring that back in a resolution. This authorizes the council to update the language of the code and to bring back a resolution setting those fine amounts. So they're not set here. And the language that I would bring back and recommend is an up to amount, and then the judge can do lower. So they just can't exceed that amount. But that's not being determined today at all. The fine that that will be incurred will be determined at a later time by resolution. But right now, our current code has violations listed in letter wise, an A violation, B violation, C, D, E, F. Our violations are opposite the direction the state ORS goes. So in the Oregon Revised Statute, both crimes, felony and misdemeanor, and violations, the lower letter A is the highest level, meaning it's the worst. And then B is a little less, C is a little less, and so forth. And we have all the way up to an X violation in Oregon now. That was the newest thing from Measure 110 reform, where they don't want someone to necessarily have a crime that can't be expunged, so they created a new one, X. But it is an A, B, C, D, E, F. In our current code, A is the lowest. So it's opposite state, and it kind of goes against the rest of the state in that level. So one of the things that when I sought legal counsel's advice on updating this portion, it was, notice there's no levels. So that's one of the things that would be updated in our code instead of saying it's an A violation, B violation at all. Right now, that's not defined. If the council wants to keep it at that level, we're going to have to look at every title, every section in the entire code and find anywhere that references a level of violation and edit that. Or this is being replaced in entirety, but just saying it's an infraction. It's a violation. It's not a crime. It's only punishable by a fine. that the judge determines their guilt and then we'll establish that fine. The fine is not going to be set until at a later time, but this is changing the format from being an A, B, C, D, E, F to just saying it's an infraction, it's a fine. And it simplifies it, and the judge will have the discretion as the amount at that time after a resolution would be adopted at a later time. This is a lot. And guess what? I promise every meeting is going to have a lot from here out as we're going to be addressing code updates. It's a lot, but this is a little one. We have another ordinance coming before us later that we don't have to decide on tonight. It's just a workshop where it is simply getting the information and we'll vote on it at our next meeting. Because it's a lot of information to take in tonight and I get that. This one is because as we've been looking at different things in the code and we've been trying to establish an IGA with Jackson County about code enforcement, we have to have a mechanism for dealing with the violations. And if the violations are substantial, I mean, the attorney looked at the levels and was like, oh, you guys aren't even going to cover your expenses with what the current code says. So it was kind of like, where do we start? What should the language be from what our current code was that was last updated in 87 to where are we going? So this is kind of just starting with dealing with, can we do code enforcement? What's that level going to be? Where's it going?
So am I hearing that we're gonna do a second reading? Is what you're wanting to
No.
adopt this?
So if the council is ready to go for a second reading, then a motion to read and the second one can be for title only. So I don't have to read the full ordinance again. So it could be a motion to read the ordinance for a second reading by title only is an acceptable motion.
I still have a question, kind of off of his. So if, let's say we are dealing with, somebody that's got trash in their front yard or high grass, let's just say high grass, fire danger. And we issue a violation for that day. So we sit there and we write this notice, they get given that notice that they're in violation. Every day since after that, do we have to keep doing a violation? Or is it just assume that they're gonna get a violation every day to add up that fine?
So how the process would normally work is when somebody has a violation that's noted, we're gonna go out as staff, whether it's me or one of the field staff, we're gonna go out and we're gonna probably take pictures. We're gonna see if we can knock on the door and talk to somebody and bring to attention where in the code it says they need to deal with what's going on. And say, I really need you to take care of this. And then I'm gonna follow up and say, one, I talked to you, or no, a complaint was received and we see evidence via these photos, or I saw in person this stuff, that there's a violation of this code. I'm going to give you until such and such a date to clean it up.
That answers my question.
And if it's not cleaned up by that date, then we can then follow up with the next step, which either would be a higher level of engagement or saying, okay, you didn't do it by such and such a date. If you don't have anything by this date, we're sending you to court. Or you're going to be cited into court, or there'll be something else. So we're always going to go for compliance first. My goal is not to be punitive. My goal is like, there is a property that I know that has excessive trash on it right now. And I have been trying to talk to the people about, we needed that trash off the property. We need you to get that cleaned up. We need to get it hauled away. And it's one of those things that it is a clear violation. And my first thing isn't to say, I'm sending you to court and every day you don't have it, you're going to have a fine attached to it. It's, how can I help you get there? Okay, that's not working. So the next step for me is I'm going to have to send them a letter that says, you need to have this cleaned up by such and such a date. And that date needs to be a reasonable date. It needs to be achievable. It's not tomorrow.
So who decides that? Is that just up to you depending on the
It's a code
situation?
enforcer.
It is, I am still working to get an intergovernmental agreement with the county. My goal was that the city would handle the first phase of trying to get somebody to comply. If that didn't work, to up the ante to the county, because I don't really want to spend a lot of money sending the county to do things, but they have more staff and they can maybe take things to the next level. And then if we have to take it to court, we have to take it to court, not necessarily the county, so it's like, I want every opportunity for somebody to be in compliance, and I'm going to give them that chance to do that first. But if not, we will, and legal counsel is going to help with us setting what those standards should be. And as time comes, do we need to do further updates in the code? Now, one of the ones you brought up specifically is nuisance. And nuisance has its own violation section under chapter 8. So this section that we're dealing with right now won't actually even apply to that necessarily, because in section 8, which deals with nuisance, has its own penalty. We will need to bring that back and have that updated as well. But everything else in the code that someone is supposed to comply with, the mechanism for holding someone accountable to say, we have a code for a reason and you need to actually follow the code. If there's not an enforcement mechanism, basically they can say, what are you going to do about it? And there's nothing I can do about it. So this gives the city the authority to follow up. Always, we're going to try to talk to somebody, then we'll send a formal thing and then we'll go from there. And that outcome is simply sending them to court eventually. And the judge can say, I'm going to cumulatively do 1 fine, or no, this could have been this. And I see where you've been given time after time after time, and there's no excuse. I'm going to throw all of it at you. That's at the judge's discretion. And thankfully, I don't have to be the judge. I just want to try to get somebody to follow the code and to be in compliance with the code. And this gives us a mechanism to do that. Mr. Mayor, Councilor Martin had his hand up as well.
Yes.
Please talk closer to that mic so we can hear you.
For you, the city that's gotta go to court, or are you just gonna send them an email?
Oh, no, we would have to actually go to court, and I would have to bring up evidence and present that to the judge. Now, our language here is they don't get a jury trial. It's the judge. And so I'm sure none of you have ever been to traffic court, but if somebody goes to traffic court, the police officer presents the case and the person who got cited presents their case. It's not attorneys generally. It's, and that's kind of the same thing here. The city presents our case and the person that's the property responsive person for the property would present their case and the judge would then make a ruling. They're not crime. They will not face jail. It is that it will be a fine.
When you send a spokesman, then you personally go in yourself.
It's not necessarily going to be me, but right now I don't have a staff person that is proficient with the courts or testimony or code. I'd like to get there. I will tell you that even Michelle's job description had code enforcement in a little bit. But we're rebuilding. And that's why we're working on the IGA with Jackson County as well. So we're going to work out those details. Our legal counsel is also available to go on our behalf. If the other party has an attorney, our attorney will go. And so then I'd have to go, or whoever went out and viewed it as testimony. That's how court works. But you guys pay a lot of money for my time. So I'm not the most efficient one to handle it, but right now it's under my shoulders because everything in the city is on my shoulders right now. Everything is my responsibility as your employee. And then I delegate down through the staff, through our current model of government that passed in the charter, right? You guys have one employee, you have me. And then it's up to me to make sure everything happens. So my goal is to delegate it, but that's going to take some time to get it going.
So I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any reason to rush this through tonight, or we going to get out there and get this done?
I would hope that we can get this done. I don't believe there's anything in the language that would harm anybody,
Mm.
but, at the same time, I don't want to rush you guys, but what we have right now really needs updated. And like I said, this was posted on the website and put out there at least a week in advance, so we met the requirements of our charter to get it done tonight.
Hey, council. I'm looking at you.
I'd like to make a motion. I say I'd like to make a motion to pass.
Wait.
Oh,
We need to do
sorry,
a second reading by
I
title
would
only.
like to make a motion of a second reading of ordinance number 25-2.
Title only.
By title only.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Counselor Beachai,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren,
Yes.
Counselor Martin,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier, Counselor Stancliff,
Yes.
Lily.
Ordinance number 25-02, an ordinance of the city of Gold Hill amending Title I of the Gold Hill Municipal Code, amending certain fees for violations. Next step would be a motion to adopt ordinance 25-02. If you guys want.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 25-02.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and I have a second. Roll call, please.
Wait. Any further discussion?
Any further discussion?
Counselor Beachai,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren,
Yes.
Counselor Martin,
Yes.
Counselor Frazier, Counselor Stancliff.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, counselors.
And to clarify, this ordinance, as most ordinances with our charter, will go into effect in 30 days. So it gives us some time that we will, it's not like tomorrow, this is now, so we have 30 days, it'll go into effect.
Okay. So now we have consent agendas, minutes from previous meetings. And we have a bunch. Now, I have a question really on this. Can I just go ahead and read them all? And then we take one motion to clear all minutes?
Correct. So the consent agenda, generally speaking, these are routine things, unless there's any amendments that need to make to any of them. A motion to adopt the consent agenda can include everything in that. And it's not a bad idea. Mr. Mayor, we can say the consent agenda is minutes from these previous meetings and we can read them all out.
Mhm.
And then a motion could be made at that time to say, I move we adopt the consent agenda. And you don't have to then reread all the minutes.
Okay. Counselors, do you have a problem with that? Are there any issues there?
There.
Okay, so item 7, consent agendas, minutes from previous meetings. We have July 2nd, 2024, city council meeting. July 16th, 2024, special management, I guess, charter. August 6th, 2024, council meeting. September 3rd, 2024, council meeting. October 1st, 2024, council meeting. November 19th, 2024. December 3rd, 2024, council meeting. December 17th, 2024, council meeting. December 19th, 2024, special council meeting.
And Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, that one from July 16th was a special meeting related to the charter. I think I heard the word management. I don't,
Yes.
that abbreviation was meant to be meeting.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to pass the consent agenda. Second that.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Counselor Beachai,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren.
Yes.
Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Counselor Frazier. Counselor Stancliff.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Okay, item 8, council considerations. We have a resolutions 25-R-09, a resolution declaring a council seat vacant. Lily. You have information on this?
Yes, just
Thank
one
you.
moment. I'll pull it up for y'all. Okay, so City of Gold Hill Resolution 25-R-09, a resolution declaring council seat vacant. I will read the resolution. Whereas the City of Gold Hill Charter of 2024. I have to pause just to say that because it's the first time we've had a resolution with the new charter stuff in this level, but thank you all. Whereas the City of Gold Hill Charter of 2024, Section 7, Section 7.4 vacancies states that an office shall be deemed vacant upon declaration by the council after the incumbent's failure to qualify for the office within 10 days of the time of the term of office is to begin and by ceasing to reside in the city. And whereas Counselor RJ Wright was elected city council on November 5th, 2024. And whereas Counselor RJ Wright has failed to qualify for the office within 10 days of the time the term of office is to begin, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Gold Hill as follows. 1, the council seat held by Counselor RJ Wright is hereby declared vacant due to her having ceased to reside in the city limits of Gold Hill. 2, the vacancy shall be posted as vacant and attempted to be filled as soon as possible. 3, the resolution shall be effective immediately upon its adoption. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Now, do you need a motion? Hearing that. So right now I'll entertain a motion. Pass resolution 25-R-09.
I'll make a resolution to pass resolution number 25-R-9.
I'll second.
So I have a motion and I have a second. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Counselor Reachide.
Yes.
Counselor Berggren.
Yes.
Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Counselor Frazier. Counselor Stancliff.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, councilors. Under item 8, council considerations, section B, resolutions 25-R-10, the resolution approving the adoption of a volunteer handbook for the City of Gold Hills Volunteer Hub. Lily, you going to read that for us?
I am. So it is recommended that we have a volunteer handbook for the City of Gold Hill. We currently are utilizing the Gold Hill Volunteer Hub as our volunteer process, and the handbook that the Volunteer Hub has adopted. This is a resolution for us to adopt that as our handbook as well. This is also something that is a risk management thing that our insurance rates us on. And so having this adopted is an important part of keeping our insurance rates down. The Hub handbook came from CIS Insurance, and we adopted it to be for us. And so the guidelines, essentially, I will read this because it is a resolution, and so a resolution approving the adoption of a volunteer handbook for the City of Gold Hills Volunteer Hub. Whereas the City of Gold Hill recognizes that volunteers play a vital role delivering services to the city, and volunteering allows citizens to give back to their community in a meaningful ways and is a critical resource to the city. And whereas the volunteer handbook of the City of Gold Hill provides guidelines, information, and support for all volunteers, elected and appointed officials for the City of Gold Hill. And whereas adoption of the handbook is necessary in order to comply with Oregon law and city county insurance services and to better accommodate the actualities of city volunteer workplace. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Gold Hill as follows. 1, the City of Gold Hill adopts the volunteer handbook, which shall be made available to all volunteers, elected and appointed officials within the city. 2, the City of Gold Hill shall ensure that all volunteers, elected and appointed officials receive appropriate training and orientation as outlined in the volunteer handbook. 3, the city of Gold Hill shall periodically review and update the volunteer handbook to reflect any changes in law, insurance requirements, and best practices to the support of city's volunteers and their contributions. And 4, this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its adoption.
So councilors, I'm going to entertain a motion at this time. You want this passed?
I'll make a motion to pass resolution number 25R10.
I second.
Any other questions? All right, I have a motion. A second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Martin, were you the second? Oh, thank you, Counselor Berggren. Roll call. Counselor Beachide,
Yes.
Counselor Berggren,
Yes.
Counselor Martin.
Yeah.
Counselor Frazier, Counselor Stancliff.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, councilors. Now, Lily, this is where I'm needing you, so I'm not understanding the workshop informational. No action.
Okay, so we have the ability to have different things on the agenda, and during this portion of the meeting, I have this next 3 items, this next section, all listed as informational, that no actions to be taken, and this portion is under a workshop. So instead of closing the meeting and starting a new meeting that we're convening as a workshop, it's not necessary. We just put it on the agenda that this portion is a workshop, that we're not taking action. So even though you see that there's an ordinance, that there's a resolution and another resolution, we're going to do this as information. And we're going to talk about it now because at this point, my goal is 1, to collect questions from you as a council based on this information. So tonight, Michelle is going to be documenting the questions that you guys come up with. If I can answer it tonight, I will, but I'm actually going to send it back to legal counsel. So a few months ago, it contracted for legal counsel for the city to be with the local government law group. And the local government law group is a firm out of Eugene. They have an attorney here in Southern Oregon that's been helping us regularly. Lori, you've seen her on a meeting or two. But the neat thing about contracting with the firm is we get all their attorneys. And one of the things that happened is we passed a new charter. And in that new charter, we updated finance that we're going to follow state law. So that means we need to adopt procurement and contract signing and purchasing authority stuff. But it's a lot of information and I want you guys to have the time to go through it. So I'm going to go through some things with you and we're going to gather questions, and the attorney Carrie that's in Eugene that helped us with this packet is we're going to get her the questions and we'll answer them on February 4th when we have the hearing for this. Now, as a council in our code, you play the role of 2 things. You're not only the city council, you are the contract review committee for the city. So you're going to find that when we meet on February 4th, we're having a joint meeting as both the city council and the contract review board, because the things that you'll be doing affect both. And so we'll lead you through that process, but I'm going to start with a letter. First and foremost, the packet I initially emailed out, there was a notice of joint meeting. This went in the paper and in the Rogue River Press and in a contract, something up at the state that the attorneys handled for us so that we could have the hearing on February 4th. I also put this on our website immediately upon receiving it and setting that time. So this notice is given that the city of Gold Hill will hold a joint meeting of its council and its local contract review board regarding adoption of public contracting rules on the 4th day of February 2025 at 6 p.m. The meeting will be held at the city council chambers at 420 North 6th Avenue, Gold Hill, Oregon, and the proposed resolution opts the city out of the Attorney General Model Rules of Public Contracting. That's a mouthful, I know. and adopts alternative public contracting rules and exemptions. A public hearing for the purpose of taking comments on the city's draft findings supporting the exemption of certain classes of special procurements and public improvement contracts from competitive bidding requirements will be held at the joint meeting only if requested in writing. And to request a hearing or for questions, contact City Manager Lily Morgan. So this was published in the paper. So if we have somebody that requests that hearing, we'll have it. Otherwise, we'll move forward with adopting the ordinance in that, but it'll be listed as a public hearing that night as well. So I want to start with the email we got from the attorney on this matter. And essentially, instead of us coming up with all of this on our own, the legal firm had come up with a packet that they've helped several cities with. This cost us $800 for the packet. I believe it was worth every penny when you see that it's 100-some pages of information that they put together. But let's start with the letter and go through that. And then we'll look at the ordinance, we'll look at the resolutions, and then take questions. Another thing so not only are we going to gather your questions tonight, I also need you to weigh in on what the spending limits you want me to have are. And that will also impact my ability to sign contracts up to a certain amount. So you're kind of pre-authorizing me to do things up to a certain limit. And that will be determined, and we'd like to know what that level is, so when we come back on the 4th, the language in the resolution will be the right numbers. So we'll talk about that in a bit. So our options and the things that we're going to determine out of this time. What our questions are that we want the attorney to answer. And I'll get those to her, so we'll have the answers to present to you on the 4th. What the spending limits and what level of contracts I can sign on your behalf. Anything above those limits you set has to come to the full council. And then if we need that attorney to be available to us on the 4th, she would take part in the meeting with us if we have questions. Other than just sending her the questions and she gives the answers, so that we have yet to determine. So that's kind of the gameplay on this section. This is informational only. Our goal is to gather questions so we can bring back answers. Okay, so enclosed are a resolution, the notice I've already read, draft findings, which are important in a hearing, and accompanying public contracting rules that were drafted to replace the Attorney General's model rules. Oregon Revised Statute, which is the abbreviation ORS, chapters 279A, 279B, and 279C are considering the public contracting code or code in this letter. It's been in place since March 1st, 2005. Since that date, the legislature has amended some aspects of the code nearly every session. They did not in 2024, but we're watching to see if they did do this session in 2025. The most recent changes that took place 1 year ago, January 1st, 2024. And per ORS 279A.065, the Attorney General's model rules govern government agency public contracting. The statute goes on, however, to allow a public entity, us, to adopt its own procurement rules, which may or may not include portion of the Attorney General's model rules. Agencies adopting their own rules must determine whether the updates are required each time the code is amended to ensure compliance with statutory changes. Moving forward, I will conduct that review for you. So by us paying the block form of us buying into this information, they're going to keep us, as long as they're our attorney, they're going to keep us current on this stuff and bring it to us when we need to. So that's a good thing we bought into their services for this. But this is important because our last charter, the 1968 charter, said that anything over $2,000 has to go to public bid. Well, our engineer has been working on that water line replacement for a couple months more, several months now. And we're just getting ready to go to bid in February. It's taken months to prepare everything to go to bid. Could you imagine if every expense we had over $2,000 had to go to bid? It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, and it doesn't follow current state law. So one, the ordinance that's coming is going to throw out the old stuff. The charter's updated to follow, but we are looking at a process of adopting our own because there's things in the Attorney General's model that doesn't apply to us. And so it deals with state agencies and all this other stuff that we don't need that in our code. We only need the stuff that applies to us. So they gave a provision for local government to adopt their own. So I'm going to keep going through this 3-page thing just so that we're all on the same page on the letter from our attorney. The overview. To a great extent, the enclosed rules reflect the substance of this Attorney General's model rules to ensure compliance with the code. Rules not dictated by statute have been modified to grant the city the greatest level of flexibility and to simplify them as much as possible. We want that. We want to have as much flexibility in the work that we're doing, and we want the language to be understandable by everybody involved. For instance, in drafting these rules, I omitted the Attorney General's provisions allowing your entity to consider debt to the state when assessing the contractor's qualifications. If that is an important factor to your city, it can always be added in to specific solicitation. Additionally, we filled in holes created by the code and the model rules, which otherwise would not have allowed flexibility when purchasing and surplusing personal property or the use of requests for proposal for public improvement contracts. These updated rules include refinements to the Attorney General's model rules, as well as address legislative amendments adopted through the 2023 legislative session, such as, number 1, effective January 1st, 2024, Senate Bill 1047 increases 1, the small procurement direct award threshold for goods and services under Division 47 and public improvement under Division 49 contracts from $10,000 to $25,000. And 2, the intermediate procurement threshold for goods and services contracts from $150,000 to $250,000 under Division 47. The legislature did not adopt a similar intermediate procurement increase for public improvement contracts. Therefore, Divisions 47 and 49 intermediate procurements have different upper thresholds yet again. We have increased our E-17 personal service threshold from $10,000 to $25,000 to correspond with Division 47 small procurement increase. So there is a tier to public contracting and public spending. And an example of this, I'll bring it over in front of you here. So goods and services, equipment and supplies, and non-personal services, it falls under Division 47. Up to $25,000, we don't have to go out for quotes. It can just be a direct award. So I can spend up to $25,000 without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. But from $25,000.01 to up to and equal to $250,000 based on different criteria, if 3 vendors are not available, I have to show that I either got a written or oral, at least 3 quotes up to $250,000. And then above $250,000, I have to go through a formal request for or RFP or a sealed bid process. So as long as it's under $250,000, I just have to get 3 quotes. These levels were just changed by the legislature a year ago, is what she was saying on that on the small level. It used to be just $10,000 a direct, and now it's up to $25,000. And then if we can't discern the contract amount, we have to check and make sure we did the right thing. So this came from our attorney with these levels, and each of the levels, goods and services, public improvement, personnel or personal services, which is our engineer, our architect. So with our engineer, for instance, we went out to bid for our engineer before, and we have procured an engineer on our behalf. But without that process, I could have a direct award of up to $100,000 of just contracting with an engineer to do something on our behalf for state law. And then from 100,000 to 250,000, I would have an informal written RFP. And then above $250,000, we'd have to have a formal RFP. And so there's levels of spending that are allowed in state law based on the type of spending that we're doing. So this is what, when she's talking about Division 47, Division 48, and Division 49, and the levels, each of those tiers that you see the arrows, the top one is the small, then there's an intermediate level, and then there's the highest level. So that's what they're referencing. And they provided this chart to give us an example of how we can do it. So we kind of have a guideline once this is all adopted, what state law says right now.
Can we get a copy of this?
Absolutely. But this doesn't affect us right now because we don't have an adopted policy.
Exactly. So they don't even have the debt.
We left the debt out. Right now, let's add the debt question to the attorney. So she can weigh in more, but right now, I just want to go through the letter with you about what it's doing, but I wanted to what good does it do to say what the small level is, the intermediate level, and the upper level if you didn't have a reference? So that's why I wanted to show you the chart, to show you
Okay.
where that comes into play. And she's saying the legislature did not adopt those intermediate levels for the Division 49, which was the public improvement. That's construction or reconstruction or major renovations. So the numbers between the three areas are not all the same. So you have to know the different things. So that's what one is saying. Okay, number 2, House Bill 2295 expanded the preference for service disabled veterans to all veterans. This minor change is reflected in Divisions 46 and 49 of our updated rules. In sum, a business must be 51% owned by a qualifying veteran. The owner must manage the day-to-day operation of the enterprise, and the business must have annual revenues below $23.98 million. As with all preferences, consult ORS 200.005 to determine exactly who qualifies. So in public procurement, there is something that if you have two bids that are similar or in the same capacity, you have to give preference. It used to be you'd have to give preference to a business owned by a service disabled veteran. The state changed that language to say you now give preference to a business that is just any veteran. It doesn't have to be a service disabled veteran. It's just a veteran owned. And to qualify, those are those terms there. So there's 100 some pages of the rules. We're not going through those 100 pages tonight, but it gives us a guide that when we go to do something, there's rules specific to these sections that we have to follow.
That includes minority groups too, right?
Not that section. That's a
It's
different
different,
preference.
okay.
Yeah. Rule 137-046-0305 now allows but does not require a public contracting agency to grant a 5% preference to for-profit businesses that benefit society or the environment, known as a certified B Corp. And that came from House Bill 3572. And so there's going to be certain circumstances that a B Corp is going to get a 5% preference in ranking in a bid. 4, our rules continue to track state law, making demolition contracts and those for the removal of hazardous waste, public works, subject to prevailing wage laws. That fell under Senate Bill 594. 5, public hearings are no longer necessarily required for public improvement contract exemptions. Instead, Notice is required. If a hearing is requested, one must be held. We're doing that. We put the notices in the papers. If no one requests a hearing, we move on. If they request one, we have to have the hearing. And if that's requested, we'll give you the steps to do at that time on the 4th. The 2019 legislature modified its qualification-based solicitation, or QBS, requirements for Division 48 consultants. Division 48 was the regulated personal services like architect, engineer, that kind of thing. Primarily architects and engineers to allow price to be used as award criteria, subject to certain requirements and limitations. And 7, for contracts over $500,000, 2019 legislation requires contracting agencies to place amounts deducted as retainage into interest-bearing escrow accounts unless the contractor requests an alternative non-cash retainage method. I haven't dealt with that one yet. We'll see if we do when it comes to the next steps of our CDBG grant, when we get the money for replacing the reservoir and some of those other things. Right now, we're in the design process, but the next step is the 2.25 million we're eligible for the construction piece. And that's over that $500,000 potentially. So that would come into play there. So now we'll go into the exemptions, but one thing I would say that this is all foreign to us. And the reason why every bit of this language is foreign to us is because the city hasn't kept up with the code. Our charter was so out of date that none of this was a part of our policy and such. There is, under the contract review board portion of Title II of our code, a little bit there. But really, there's a lot that's changed that we should have been keeping up on as a city for the last few decades that we have not. So this is all going to sound new, but it's not new to the rest of the state. And it's part of why I wanted a workshop tonight and not have us vote on this. I'm introducing the information. We're going to have some time to read it and process it and bring it back and go the next steps. So my hope is to do this regularly with you, that we have workshops with information, but there might be need to adopt things as well that night. That's why we're doing a combined meeting workshop tonight. But there's a lot of information that we need to update as a city, and we're going to work through that all. Okay, section B, exemptions. The final section of the attached rules sets forth exemptions addressing standard purchasing needs not otherwise covered by the code or the model rules. Pursuant to your request, I have added a utilities exemption based on the county language you provided as E11. I've asked that our city utilities, our water stuff, be exempted so we can get some things done. And that's what she's referencing here. And we had another government entity that had an example of that language that they're putting in here for us so that our utilities can be exempted and we can sometimes just get repairs and some stuff done, which is exciting for us because we have a lot of that to do. This exemption is not included in our standard exemption packet. Most utilities are provided by governments, so are already exempt. When provided by one private entity or rates are set by law, those utility contracts are also exempt. Lastly, from my perspective, when telecoms compete for business, I recommend a competitive process. I agree with that. I included using a competitive process in this context as an option, not a requirement. One of the reasons why I asked for this language is because we contract out the operations of our utility. So that's why it's not automatically exempt for government, because we don't have the staff doing it. We have a contract doing it on our behalf. So that's why I asked for this language. So they essentially would have the covering of being government since they're doing it for us as a government. Please review all rules and the implementing resolution carefully to ensure that the chosen procedure and exemptions meet your city's need. If not, to the extent permitted by the code, we can tailor them accordingly. One thing I'll say about the code is she did take the Attorney General's language and numbering system And that same system is in the rules. So that if anybody from anywhere looks at our rules, it will be familiar to what the Attorney General's stuff is, but they took out the stuff that didn't apply to us. And she tried to amend the language to be as flexible as possible for us within the law. But the numbering and the lettering will look similar to the state stuff. So if someone had a question, they can go to the Attorney General's rules and see how ours is different, and it's the same numbering system so that it corresponds. That's a really big deal. The amount of research they did to do this is a lot. I'll just say that. And that's why it costs so much. Spending authority. As used in the rules and the resolution, the term contracting agency references the city. The term also includes the city's chief administrative officer, his or her designee, and any other purchasing agent identified by city policy. Right now, I am the only purchasing agent for the city per the new charter. We haven't adopted any policy yet. This is our first view at policy by the council related to the new charter on purchasing. You requested a draft spending authority resolution designating you, the city manager, as the council's purchasing agent. The charter also says this, but I wanted this draft in the resolution to establish spending limits so that every purchase I make doesn't have to come to you as a council, because we'll never get anything done if you have to approve each item that I have to spend money on. But it is appropriate to have spending limits. And above those spending limits, it comes back to the council. And one of the things I will say before we go on is we're going to try to do the best for the city, that no matter who's sitting in my seat, that we're doing the best policy for the position in the city, not based on individuals, but as good policy. With that being said, no, I'm just kidding. Okay. As you were uncertain about the dollar figures to include, I set an example spending limit reflecting the public improvement formal procurement threshold of $100,000. Contracts over that amount would need separate council approval. I also highlighted possible additional delegated authority to department heads and other staff. Retain and or modify those delegations and amounts as desired. You will find in the resolutions, they're highlighted. So these sections that have some flexibility are highlighted. And I'm going to make a recommendation. We take out the department heads and the other staff because we don't have that right now. And the days of the city having a huge public works department and department head, the neat thing is when we get there, the spending authority is going to be by resolution, and resolutions can easily be changed if you need. So where we start, following the lawyer's recommendation is probably a good idea. And if we find it's problematic, then we can bring it back to the council on another resolution and y'all can adopt it. Or if I said it correctly, because there's more than three, all y'all. Okay, so all right, so we've gone through that. So adoption process. Because the proposed public contracting rules includes class exemptions for both the purchase of certain types of goods and services and public improvement contracts, which are two separate exemption adoption procedures apply. Or which means two separate exemption adoption procedures apply. ORS 279B.085 addresses special procurements, otherwise known as exemptions for the purchase of goods and services. This provision requires the making of specific findings, which are included in the attached resolution. Notice of the request for these classes of special procurement must be given at least 7 days prior to the approval of the classes. The notice must be published in at least one newspaper of general circulation in the city and in as many additional issues and publications as you may desire. We, for the most part, use Rogue River Press. We've used Rogue Valley Times, but it's not always easy to do that. And I've used Grants Pass Courier. I've tried to do a poll on Facebook to see who uses what, and everybody said everything. There was nothing that stood out. It makes it difficult because Rogue River Press goes to publish on Wednesdays, but that means you have to have everything in Mondays. So in order to have it, you have to have it a couple weeks in advance to meet these deadlines, and it doesn't always mean that's possible. So that's why sometimes we've got to use other ones. We don't have our own newspaper. So there isn't one newspaper of general circulation for the city, but we did use Rogue River Press and we're able to get the notice in there in order for the 7-day notice for the meeting in 2 weeks. So we were able to get that in time. ORS 279C.355 governs the process for granting exemptions to public improvement contracts. It requires a slightly different set of findings, which are also set forth in enclosed resolution. As noted above, such exemptions require published notice. A hearing is required only upon written request. Notice of the proposed rule exemptions must be published in at least one trade newspaper of general statewide circulation, a minimum of 14 days before the hearing. We have met this requirement. As required, the enclosed notice states that a public hearing will be held upon written request. If held, the council will take comments on the city's draft findings supporting the exemption of certain classes of contracts from competitive bidding requirements. At the time the notice is published, copies of the draft findings must be made available to the public. They have been on the website under the February 4th meeting since this all came up. So it'll have been on the website about 3 weeks by the time we get there. At the city's option, the notice may describe the process by which the findings will be adopted and may indicate the opportunity for any further public comment. I have omitted this information, but can add it at your direction. We haven't. Right now, we just have it all out there for them to see the whole packet. But I haven't specifically outlined what options there are. It's the notice is there, the rules are there, and the ordinances and resolutions are there. After filling in the blanks within the enclosed notice, please publish in the Daily Journal of Commerce or other trade newspaper of general statewide circulation at least 14 days before the meeting. I requested the law firm do that for us. They offered to do that, and I requested that they had do that. The same notice must also be published in at least one newspaper of general circulation in the city at least 7 days before the meeting. We have done that as well. The notice may also be posted on the door of the building where the meeting will be held. We can do that too. As indicated on the notice, the meeting will be held jointly by both the council and the local contract review board, i.e. in the meeting, the council will be wearing both hats. If requested in writing, the resolution and rules may only be adopted by the local contract review board after a public hearing. The council can conduct other council business at the meeting as well, so long as this is reflected in the council agenda. For example, the agenda could state, 1, we're going to call to order the joint meeting of the city council and local contract review board. We'll do the staff report with the findings. There'll be actually first the ordinance, then the resolutions. Then we'll adjourn the joint meeting and then go into, let's see. If there was written requests that we would add this second item as the joint meeting. If there isn't a request for a hearing, we can just do it under normal business. But she's recommended that we follow this level. And then for additional clarity, staff could also offer the following proposed motion to ensure that both bodies act on resolution rules. I move to adopt resolution such and such on behalf of the city of Gold Hill and on behalf of the city's local contract review board. So we'll have that language of those motions so that we make sure that we follow all the rules. And so the attorney, Carolyn, is who sent this. And so that was the letter with the instructions and kind of how we got here. Now we're going to look at the ordinance. It has a number sooner than the other ordinance we adopted tonight because I did it first. So it's technically the first ordinance of the year, but it's in backwards order because it was published first, but we're not voting on it first because I wanted to make sure we had enough time to do this right. So the ordinance allowing for adoption of public contracting rules by resolution and repealing the city's municipal code 2.08 Contract Review Board. I will be amending this unless the council objects to add and declaring an emergency. And this is going to be important. We currently have no policy in place for purchasing. We fall under the full Attorney General's code with no flexibility in anything until we adopt this policy. Potentially, we could have tried to bring it sooner, but our old charter did not allow any flexibility in the levels. We were technically out of compliance with our old charter because it required any expense over $2,000 to go to bid. And that was not in compliance with state law. One of the reasons why we needed the charter. I didn't feel comfortable bringing this forward to adopt until we knew if the new charter was going to go forward. And the new charter didn't go into effect till January 1st. We also had some other stuff going on as a staff, and so I was not able to bring it to you sooner than now. And meeting all the notice requirements, and with the holidays, it's a lot of information to take on. And I also thought it was important to have the new council address it, not the outgoing council. And so that's the reason why now. But I need to add a couple whereas clauses that declare why it would be emergency, because I don't do that lightly. And it's not something that we should throw on everything, because it certainly is not. The other ordinance will take effect in 30 days, and that's what our charter says. But in this circumstance, it's not feasible for us to bring the council together to approve every little thing that's going to happen until we get this adopted. And I don't think we can wait until March for anything to be signed or purchased. And it's for those reasons why I'm going to ask that it be addressed as an emergency on the February 4th meeting. If you have objection to that, please let me know and we won't. But I wanted you to know the why. And I did not have a chance to talk to the attorney about that specific piece. It's been on my list of questions for them. We've been going back and forth by email. We finally were able to talk by phone this afternoon at 4:30. And so I finally got that answered. And initially it's like, no, we need to wait for 30 days because you maybe could have had this take place sooner. And when I explained all that, she goes, okay, I get it. But we need to describe that because this is not something that can just be every ordinance. There truly needs to be an emergency to be an emergency. But in this situation, we can't grind to a halt. And that's why I believe it is. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So our municipal code under title 2.0.8 or 2.08.020 last codified that the city would adopt public contracting rules. And that was 1980. And so you can imagine things have changed a little bit in the last 44 years. Oh yeah, 44 years. So in 2005, Oregon Public Contracting Codes took effect and the Attorney General accordingly adopted model rules, which supplemented all previously adopted city public contracting rules set by resolutions. So even if we had stuff on the books by resolution, it would have been overridden by the Attorney General stuff. But remember, I said that our code hasn't been updated since 2004. 20 years, these changes have been in effect and Gold Hill has not adopted them. So, state law allows us to opt out of the Attorney General's model rules and to adopt our own. And the attorney has recommended some. And then in our new charter, it under section 11, I believe, the city council has determined to opt out of the AG model rules and adopt its own public contracting rules by resolution in order to facilitate future updates. So the neat thing about this is if you adopt the ordinances as the ordinance is going to say, we're adopting rules, but they're going to be changed by resolution. So that's the first and foremost is we're giving an easier chance to change things so we can do it by resolution in the future and keep it current. So this is what the ordinance would be ordaining. That Gold Hill Municipal Code 2.08 and all previously adopted ordinances, resolutions, and enactments establishing public contracting rules for the city of Gold Hill are hereby repealed. So we're replacing that portion of the code. City of Gold Hill public contracting rules, including city staff purchasing and contracting authority, will be hereafter adopted by resolution. So that will go into the code saying that when it comes to public contracting, it'll say the council is the contracting review board and the rules will be adopted by resolution. So that's the ordinance. In and of itself, it's not that big.
Mhm.
It's a simple ordinance. And it's been published enough time that other than adding the emergency stuff, it should be straightforward to be able to have the first reading and second reading. We'll get those other edits in there straight away to meet the deadline by the February 4th, because our charter says 7 days in advance, so we'll get that in there before next week.
So we just had the first reading.
No, nope,
Okay.
no, nothing official. Tonight is information only. There's
Okay.
no votes. We're just, I want to make sure we have talked about this
Okay.
and someone in the public can go look at our meeting tonight and listen. And hear the information too. Okay. So resolution 25R7. This will be the joint resolution of the council and the local contract review board opting out of the Attorney General's model public contracting rules and amending public contracting rules for the city of Gold Hill. And this is really a lot of technical details, but this is where we're adopting the rules. And if a hearing is required, it's this resolution that has findings. And those findings should be included right after the resolution in the packet as Exhibit A. Here they are. And each section says if a finding is required or what those exemptions would be. And there's 8 pages of findings that are evidence of why we should be allowed exemptions. So I'm not going to go through all of these right now unless you would like me to. Okay. But the resolution. They are, and it's printed in full in your packet before you that you can take with you.
Should be a
Your
new-
big
It should
thick
be a new-
packet.
But that thick packet in front of you has all of this in it.
Yes.
I literally opened that document and that's what you're seeing before you. So that is printed in front of you.
The portion with the clip is just the big procurement rules portion. You can pull that out. And everything that's left are your resolution.
good stuff.
Yeah, so, but this is the findings with the resolution. So the rules itself is that second portion. But essentially, this is all the levels and stuff to get us in compliance with the portions of the Attorney General stuff that we need and the reasons and of the why. We can go through these findings and say, and like one of the things, this first section, this is important because as a council, things that come before you in your quasi judicial way and in deciding on bids and stuff, having these rules, one is unlikely to encourage favoritism in the awarding of public improvement contracts or substantially diminish competition for public improvement contracts. It's important for an elected body that we're not showing favoritism, that we do things right, that there's a method of issuing something and that we're following it equally and fairly in the law, right? So that these rules, the method of this finds that it's not going to create favoritism, and then awarding of public improvement contracts under each exemption will result in substantial cost savings to the city. There we go. It's more than just that. So for instance, I'm gonna, I gotta ask you, if you're gonna talk, you gotta talk into that mic, so. No. Okay, so there's different types of bid. So there's a bid that's gonna come up at some point. that I have a certain dollar amount, and in that situation, I don't want the lowest bid. I want the most work for that dollar amount. So what can you give me for that dollar amount? And we had another grant that, I asked for a bid from different groups and they all did these low bids, but I'd leave money on the table for the grant. I had to go back and say, no, 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 no. How far can you go for this amount of money? The amount of money is flat. But how far can you go? And so in that situation, it wasn't low bid, it was high work level. How much work, how far will you go for that amount of money? So that's how I awarded that contract. It wasn't a contract per se, because it was $5,000 and it was under that signing amount. But this is finding the reasons for exemptions why we wouldn't go to bid. When is it that, I'll give you an example, this last part here. All right. Model cost accounting guidelines. I have to keep track on this stuff that when I have a project done that city staff does, that project exceeds $5,000 for that project, I have to keep the accounting of, did I save the city money by having my staff do it versus having somebody else do it? And that's when it's constructed within the city's own equipment or personnel. So there's anything exceeding $5,000 that I use staff and city's own equipment and personnel, I have to keep an accounting of how I save money, what that cost was. And then public improvement projects estimated at more than $200,000 or certain maintenance projects exceeding $125,000. I have to keep accounting requirements for that. So each section has a different thing about the why, but every type of project, remember that chart I showed you? The small awards, the intermediate awards, the high awards, each of those have different rules in each of those sections that I have to follow and keep accounting of. And either I go to bid or I don't, but it's not always going to be low bid. Sometimes there's absolutely a circumstance that multiple people, RFP stands for request for proposal. It's not always the cost. Sometimes it's the skill of the groups that do that. And so right now, when it comes to our transportation project that's coming up, the TGM grant that we got, I have to pick between a couple of engineering groups and say, who gets it? They were pre-approved through the state, so they're all pre-approved to do the project. I got to look at these equally qualified groups and say, which one's best? But it's not about low bid, right? It's about, okay, what personality do they bring? What staff do they bring? What qualifications do they bring? All those things go into bear, and I have to make a decision, and I went and checked references and they're all good. So really, we're in a win-win circumstance, but it's not a low bid. Not necessarily. It depends on the type of project. It depends on the money source. It
the
depends
amount.
on the dollar amount. So if it is above $500,000 and say we got money from the federal grants, it's going to get veteran preference. It's going to get minority and women owned and those other things that come into play. It's going to get low bid probably is going to be the factor. You have to meet an exemption of when you wouldn't do that. And this 8 pages of finding outlines all those exemptions that exist. So these 8 pages that are in your packet show when we could exempt from the standard and the norm. And so these are all listed here, and quite frankly,
No, we don't have that.
so in between your resolutions, it's not added to resolution 7.
No,
Okay, sorry, they were supposed to be included, and we will make sure that you have them before you leave tonight. So I apologize.
I was bring it up. You said you're referencing page 130, and I'm looking at the pamphlet. I got 91 pages. I don't have on it. But I think you sent this to our email too, didn't you?
Yes.
I'm not sure what happened with that. I apologize. It is on our website. And it is the most exciting nonfiction you ever read. And I will,
Having trouble sleeping.
I will print this out for you before you leave tonight. And so anyhow, the findings in here give the exemptions of when we don't have to follow all those exact rules. Because we found that in these circumstances, it'll save the city money. It meets this criteria. It's that government thing. It's those specific things that gives us the most flexibility to get the job done without adding a bunch of expenses, the goal. Anyhow, so yeah, this is, when is it a rental, advertising contracts,
Mhm.
copyrighted material, different office copier purchase. I mean, there, it outlines manufacturing direct supplies, gasoline, diesel, heating, oil. Each of these have exemptions. Utilities is listed, hazardous material removal, medical lab. We don't really do that much, but we do have lab services through the plants, concessions if we needed. So this is stuff that we don't necessarily all do, but it's all the things that could come up with the city and or the attorney general stuff. So that it gives us all that kind of stuff. So, each section, it appears, has to be judged on the effect on competition, the effect on favoritism, cost savings and other benefits, and any other factors. And so the attorney has prepared for us each of these sections that show how the award process goes, the cost savings benefits, if there's effect on competition and favoritism. So there's findings in each of these sections that if we have a hearing on the 4th, we would go through these sections in that hearing. Okay, so resolution 25R8. Here's an area. So when it comes to Tuesday night, first thing we'll deal with is the ordinance. If we adopt the ordinance that would allow it to be adopted by resolution, then we would go on to the resolution that it would adopt the rules. And that's that joint meeting between both the contract review board and the city council. And then the next resolution sets those levels that the city has that we can do the business. So this is the purchasing authority and spending limits for the city of Gold Hill staff. So this is under those procurement laws. You guys will approve me to sign contracts up to a certain amount. That those ones I can just sign. And I can spend money up to that certain amount. And above that, those decisions all have to come to the council. So, in this whereas, so we've already at this point adopted the rules. And under that, the city is the contracting agency. The city's daily operations require staff to initiate procurements for public contracts, including for goods and services and public improvements, as well as non-public contracts such as grant agreements, real property leases, in an efficient manner. In order for us to operate efficiently is what it's saying. And it's in the city's best interest that staff be able to award certain contracts in an efficient and cost-effective manner while retaining ultimate fiscal responsibility to the city council. The city council, by this resolution, wishes to delegate some contracting agency authority to the city manager and establish spending limits thereof. I'm going to recommend that portion highlighted in yellow, city department heads and other staff be taken out.
Question. So, when I'm looking at amounts of $250,000, 100,000. I don't see language in here that says, and you will also supply us with a balance statement of your spending.
So, let me get there.
Okay.
That was in that other resolution.
Okay, I didn't see it.
That other resolution said under 07. getting before the exhibit. The cost accounting guidelines, I have to keep track of it. So, honestly, that's separate. That's, I mean, how I report to you guys the budget and the spending and stuff like that. That's a different financial policy than this, but we can look at the specifics and the whole policy as a whole, but, I will tell you that I got the report that the 22-23 is finally balanced and I'm waiting any day for the 23-24 now to be done. So that is exciting. The auditors are hopefully coming in February to do both years' audits to get them done.
Lily, the reason I'm asking is because it's not so much you I'm worried about. It's about future managers coming into the city.
I
and
think it's a
having
different
that
policy.
Type of,
I think that falls under a manager's reporting back to council, and I think that's a different policy.
okay,
So we can bring that policy back. My hope is that shortly, the reason why I bring up the balances of the 22-23 year and the 23-24 is if they finally have that up to date in the finance stuff, I can also get access for you guys to run reports in the finance software. And I will actually be able to run reports in the finance software that tell you where our balance sheets are.
that's great, because we've
And-
never had that.
I know. That's why I brought you bank statement recently, because it's the best I could do, because our finance software wouldn't give us the accurate reports. So, just wait till our manager report tonight. I have something I need to disclose to you guys that is,
Don't do that now.
Scaring me.
So I got a question for Mayor. Just thinking, I remember RJ brought a question up a while back, but with our finances now, we're finally getting in place. You think it would be good in the future that we have a finance meeting quarterly?
Absolutely. And I want it to be to where that,
hold on. That is not something that's on the topic.
It's
right
not.
now,
Oh,
and
that's-
should not, it's not an
hold on,
appropriate.
I was addressing that,
Okay,
but that wasn't on the agenda.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, anyhow, this is the ability to sign contracts and the spending levels that fall under the ability for the city to be able to function while still being fiscally responsible back to the council. That's why the council sets what these limits are, not me. And so real quickly, correct. Correct, which is fairly easy to do. However, there is no department heads currently. So. And I specifically asked the attorney today, do I leave this in for in the future when we have it? And she said, nope, take it out. It doesn't apply.
Okay.
There is no spending right now that staff can do without authority, without checking with me. And I'm not going to change that right now. I'm not going to recommend that change. Right now, for instance, we just bought 20 water meters as we're replacing broken meters. And technically, every one of those meters we replace should be billing the individual water accounts for those meter replacements. That's what our code says to do. It just cost us $1,100 for 20 meters. Now, what happened is Fred, who's acting as our lead utility person right now, he put in the request to the company who sent me a quote for what it would be. And I wrote back and said, put the order through. So right now, that's the accountability. Is there's small things. Hey, I need to go pick up something that's small amounts and stuff like that. What we can say is our charter already says that I'm the purchasing authority. That's what the charter passed. But there's no rules about how much or all that other kind of stuff. The state law gave those guidelines of up to $25,000, up to $250,000 and such. But really, it's up to the council to decide how high of a spending limit do you want to give me to be able to, for instance, I'll give you an example. We put in a request to be able to get a grant to update our water master plan. The grant's eligible up to $50,000. And I got an email today inviting us to apply for that grant. We put the initial thing in and they sent back, said, okay, you can apply. I have to now work with the engineer to work out all those details of the budget and what the cost is going to be and how we can do that water master plan update. And that is a $50,000 grant. Right now, every grant and thing that we do with the state, I have to get the governor, Mr. Governor, Mr. Mayor. Couple weeks back, we got a paper we got notified that we got that CDBG grant through CARES Act funding, the 267,000. Well, we had to do a paper saying exemptions on that one because it's technically passed through federal funding. And I signed it and sent it off and I'm like, we need the mayor to sign it. Well, he hasn't been available. And so I've sat on that paper for a couple weeks now, waiting for the mayor to be able to sign it. Now at $267,000, it is appropriate that he signs it at that level. But it was one of those things that we'd already gone through all the hoops, that the council had already approved resolutions. We'd had public hearings on that grant application. We'd already jumped through this stuff. So I'm like, in reading it, I'm like, oh, I think I can sign this one. Nope. But that $50,000 one, it'd be neat if I could sign that one. And matter of fact, I think when they sent it to me, they put my name down as the person who can sign. They filled it in from the state for that. But it's not official yet because you guys haven't given me any authority to sign anything. And since 2005, we should have had some rules in place and have not. So in this situation, this resolution came from the attorney as the next steps for doing it. So essentially the recommendation is in an emergency that's spending up to a certain amount, but in normal procurement, a different amount. There is no limit on these numbers. No, there's not. There is absolutely no limit on what these numbers are. It is at the recommendation of the council. There could be that we list in this one, you have this amount, and this one, you have this amount, you know, that kind of stuff. Because like I said, when I showed you the chart of what the state said, I don't know if you can see that or not. So 25,000 doesn't require competitive quotes if it's for goods and services. And then up to $250,000, I can get 3 bids, not bids. I mean, not like formal bids, but quotes, a written or oral quote up to $250,000. However, for public improvement, that's not in the exemption stuff, you have to go to bid over a certain amount. So formal over $100,000. So she said in the letter that she set the green amount, and I didn't highlight that, by the way. The attorney highlighted those numbers because those are numbers for the council to determine, not me. But she said she put the 100,000 in there because a public contract right here requires a formal RFP and sealed bid process is required for amounts over $100,000 for public improvement. But for goods and services, it's not required until over $250,000. So anyhow, I'm going to move that back out. So she has these listed here as, okay, enter into city contracts in the amount not exceeding $100,000. Contracts over this delegated spending limit require additional authorization from the city council. Enter into contracts in an emergency in amounts not exceeding $250,000. The city manager must inform the council of all executed emergency contracts at the council's next regular scheduled meeting. I believe this couldn't happen without the mayor declaring an emergency. This isn't me declaring an emergency. This is either the governor has declared an emergency or the mayor has declared an emergency. An emergency is a specific thing under Title II of our code. Under emergency management, and there's a process there. So we need to update it because the only one that has authority to do anything right now is the mayor and the chief of police. We're gonna be in trouble.
I mean, you know how that chief of police is.
Never around.
Okay. So that is coming to you as well. Aren't we excited? Okay, recommend that the city council approve or disapprove contract awards, change orders, and amendments in amounts over $100,000. And then consistent with the previous resolution, let's see, solicitation, blah, blah, blah. Enter into contracts or issue permits for local concessions and street vendors pursuant to applicable city policy where the annual amount is to be paid by the city is not expected to exceed $100,000. Sections 2 and 3, she recommended we remove. We don't have department heads. And other staff authority, if I were gonna set that, I would probably set it at a much lower level than $1,500. If my staff is spending $1,500, I want to know why.
Why can't we remove that one too?
We can,
Okay,
but, let's see.
Well, I got it.
I actually like section 3. I would almost make section 3. I would almost recommend section 3 become section 2. And we have to strike this department head portion. And we're basically subject to prior delegation from the city manager. Who's written approval of that delegation or something like that. So, right now there has been some times we've had some purchases we need to make and I'm using my debit card. And sending the staff with my debit card.
city
make
don't have
purchase.
its own card now?
We don't yet.
Okay,
We have.
no, that's what I was gonna
We have
suggest.
2 of the 3 things in place for the city purchasing cards. I'm waiting for the 23-24 financials. So we have to take that to the bank and then we'll have everything in place that we can get purchasing cards. But I mean, even if you leave it at $1,500, I will tell you the previous recorder had a $15,000 credit card that the city was paying automatically monthly without anybody looking at it. Sorry, spending limit.
Mhm.
Spending limit of $15,000. Mine was 3 or 4,000. Both the recorder and the park superintendent had greater spending limits than I did as the city manager. And nobody was looking at those. So looking at the language of staff authority, there's no department heads, so, and I don't necessarily want staff entering into contracts, but potentially could spend money as previously approved by the city manager up to a certain amount. But this can be that if it's me, the purchasing authority, that it's delegated through me, that they can't make purchases without my approval.
I like that.
Can we go back
That's
and
the
revisit,
idea.
Joe's had his.
can we go back and just revisit the city department heads and other staff? Shouldn't we have somebody secondary to you somehow, even if it's the mayor? I mean, what happens if something happens to you and we don't have a purchasing agent? Or
So
just,
we passed a resolution at the meeting 2 weeks ago that made Mallory a signer as well as me. And the mayor and the council president are signers of checks. Until I can get the 23-24 balance sheets done, which they're working on, but they had to go redo 22-23 because what was there was wrong. Made up numbers were entered in the finance software and had to be removed. And we had to do the actual deposits and actually reconcile the banks to get the numbers accurate. And that's now done. But to redo 2 years worth of work is time consuming and frustrating. And we're paying a lot of money to have that redone. But we're now waiting for the 23-24 things. The other things the bank requested are there already. So I got that original bill from 1895 that incorporated us as a city. We had to get that. Had to get a letter from the Secretary of State's office. Got that. So now we're just waiting for the 23-24 balance sheets, which couldn't be done till 22-23 were fixed. And it's the last couple sets of, the last staff inherited a mess from the previous staff before them, came up with a solution, but that had to be fixed too. But they inherited a mess, but it wasn't quite right what was fixed. Some of it was absolutely there, but it wasn't complete. And there was ways they came up with a fix that wasn't quite right either. And that had to do with not having gone through the training of doing the software, so to learn those steps that needed to be done. So it's been being fixed. Mallory has done more than a yeoman's work to get that all caught up, working with our financial consultant. A massive amount of work that she's taken all that on, that we can now say that the 22-23 is reconciled. It's huge. Thanks, but can't get the purchasing cards until then. And so then what should those purchasing card limits be? And should they be allowed to spend without approval? And so right now, I would say they go to the hardware store and some other things and probably 30, 40, 50 bucks here and there. When it came to getting some of the irrigation stuff that we were trying to get parts to repair, I went because it was hundreds of dollars, not 2 digits, it was 3 digits. So I went. But at the same time, there's going to be a time when I want to be able to send Fred to the store and say, can you go pick this stuff up? And us have a process for that. So when I started here a year ago, a little over a year ago, you had technically 2 department heads that answered directly to the council other than the city manager. And you had 2 staff that answered to those department heads who also didn't answer to the city manager. So you had 4 employees that answered to or 3 employees that answered directly to the council, 2 employees that answered to those other department heads. And now we don't have any of it. So now it's me that you have, I'm your 1 employee. And I think it's appropriate that I can delegate some to staff. If we had department heads, there would be a level of delegating some to department heads. I noticed where Rivers policy says staff have a spending amount and a monthly limit. So there's a one-time purchase amount, but also a limit on a whole month, how much they could spend. Department heads have a little bit more, and then the city administrator has another level.
And when you get your cards like that, you'll have the ability to put that limit on there. Kind of like us at Habitat.
Correct,
We have a spending limit on our card
correct.
that we just can't go over in 30 days.
Absolutely, but one thing so we've gotten the credit card statements now from the last couple of years. That for some reason are no longer in City Hall with some staff changes. And they're not reconciled yet. And that's really hard to do when those receipts have also walked out the door. And so there's some issues with that, but that's the next step. The bank itself has been reconciled in the finance software, but the credit card spending was not. And I don't want to see us repeat where we were, where you can have spending and it be paid automatically without anybody looking at it. And so we're going to put some checks and balances in place. But right now we don't have department heads. Right now I have a lead in the field, but he answers to me, and the other employee takes guide from the lead, but also answers to me. And then in the office, we're all working as a team in the office right now. But ultimately, because we each are delegated different stuff, but we're covering for each other and we're all doing different stuff. But Michelle and Mallory have different skills. Mallory's is a number person and Michelle's a words person. And we bring different skills and gifts to the thing, and they're both helping me be a better employee for you. And but ultimately they don't answer to each other. They're working together in tandem, answering to me. So now I'm the department head and the manager in one. And what the charter says is if I were gone, I can delegate somebody in my place to fill that role till I get back. So right now, that would be Mallory, is who I would designate to make decisions in my absence. She is somebody who's handled government contracts. She's handled military government contracts from the contractor side of things, not the government side. She was the contractor side getting those things. She understands procurement laws and all that kind of stuff. Well, Michelle would be the one advising on public meeting laws because she knows that stuff. And so Mallory's been here longer. So I would delegate her, but Michelle would step right up and come alongside Mallory and say, let me help with this. And they would work together. And so it's kind of cool. There's something coming up. I'm going to be taking some time off in February. And I talked to Mallory today saying, I'm gonna need you to cover payroll while I'm gone, because there's gonna be a payroll cycle while I'm gone. And so she's gonna sit through the next couple payrolls with me, because we just switched to a new software and a new process. And so, but that's me to manage, right? Is to set those people in place in those spots. Sorry, talk too much. Anyhow, right now we don't have department heads, so what I would say is the authority of the city manager and other staff. And then when it comes down to those levels, council, you get to decide the numbers in green, not me. But for me, staff, that number would be less. Unless approved prior by the city manager or something like that, if you want to leave it that level, but, and this whole section about department heads, since we don't have them, we can take that section out. But right now, for the most part, unless it's under $100, the staff aren't really buying unless they're checking.
Would we discuss these numbers tonight or do we wait?
If you discuss numbers tonight, then we'll bring this back at the next meeting as a resolution with the numbers that you guys recommend. And so, yes, numbers is one of the things that I was hoping to have from you guys tonight. And like I said, the 100,000 was, the limit of public improvement. So construction, reconstruction, major renovation, that required 100,000. If it's goods and services, 250,000 was the limit that requires bids. So for the bid limits, anything above those levels. So that's where this came from. Notice that in the resolution, it doesn't say if it's for goods and services versus, it just says an amount for contracts. So if you would like this number to be less, or if you want it to be more, I have to follow state procurement laws no matter what. It's up to the council. I'm not going to tell you what to do on this. I would say that the city has a history of needing more accountability. And like I said, we want to do good policy based on the city's need and the accountability of the public, not who's sitting in the seat. It can be changed later by resolution. And, the amounts were what the attorney had recommended and put in there based on the procurement of contracts for construction.
I personally am okay with all those numbers, but I am curious about number section 3. The numbers for them, for the employees. The amount. Not exceed and the amount that they, you know what I'm saying? But other than that, I'm okay with everything myself.
If anything, I would scratch the information about entering into contracts. I don't necessarily want staff entering into contracts.
I'll agree with that. We don't.
Yeah.
we don't need them in.
Yeah. The verbiage, I trust you'll do that fine. I'm just worried more about the amount. What amounts have we are throwing around in your head?
I want everyone to look at this.
The lawyer recommended removing section 2 and 3
Hey.
entirely.
Take Lily out of the factor right now.
Yeah.
Say we have somebody else sitting there. That's how you should be reading this
Yeah.
and how you want this to go.
So do we want,
Because if she goes, say 5 years comes up and she takes another position and we have somebody else, we need to start looking and focusing on, like Lily was saying, safeguarding the city. This is what got us here in the first place.
Let me give you an example where this would come into play, maybe that we would want it in there or not. So I'm gonna put Michelle on the hot seat. She's our new grant administrator. She's gonna be looking at grants that we can apply for and different things. What if there's a $500 grant out there? Does Michelle have the authority to sign a contract for a $500 grant? And this says, if within the duly adopted budget, staff other than department heads, are authorized to enter into a contract, city contracts, in an amount not to exceed $1,500. Subject to prior delegation from the staff members, department head, and city manager's written approval of that delegation. So it does have the limit that they have to have the city manager's written approval of that delegation. Right now, they don't have the delegation to sign a contract at all. But it should also be looked at that when you purchase something on credit by either putting it on the city account or by using that credit card, that's technically a contract. When I make this purchase, I'm promising I'm going to pay it back. That I made a contract with you, I'll pay that debt, essentially.
But applying for a grant is different than actually getting awarded the grant and bringing that to us to approve it.
So if you were to say the $100,000 for the city manager right now, that $50,000 grant for updating the water master plan,
Doesn't come to us. That's.
I
Yeah,
can
bring
sign
this-
that.
I'm
'Cause
bringing this up.
She just signs it.
Right, that's
So-
why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah.
It's not the application of the grant. It's once we get approved the grant, we have to sit there and go through the contract process of accepting that. And
Unless
and
you
to-
give authority that things at a different level can be done either by a staff or department head. So normally a department head limit would be $25,000. Can a department head say we did another 4-way foundation grant for another $10,000? Could the department head just sign that?
But-
When you have a city that has the multiple layers and multiple things, not everything should go to the city manager. And so that's why you allow department heads to do certain things. And some things are kind of routine that the department head doesn't even need to see, that they have enough staff, they can do that. We don't have all those
but
layers.
we're not gonna have a department head. That's, we're taking that language out of there.
Correct.
I'm trying to focus on what our limits are for like city manager. So your staff.
Okay, I'll
is
go
not
back up
entering
to
into-
the-
Into contracts. The only thing that they might be doing is going down to the store and buying something.
But what I'm saying is when they go and buy something, unless they're giving them cash, they're entering into a contract by making a purchase. So we have to look at this as not only entering into a contract, but also making purchases at this level. Because a purchase is a contract.
So what section are we looking at when we're discussing this? I'm getting confused. I'm looking at section 2, letter A. And then I'm looking at section 3.
Okay, oh,
Gotcha.
okay,
You see
hold
what I'm
on.
doing? I'm
hold
looking
on,
at-
hold
I'm
on.
Looking at it.
Section 2 is listed twice.
Yes.
So technically, 1 was definitions, 2 is city manager authority, 3 should have been department head, 4 should have been other staff. The numbers were duplicated.
Okay.
That's why I'm confused now. Okay, so let's
that-
go back. If
that-
you want to do city manager first, Okay,
I'm
so-
trying to go down the list and that's why I'm like, keep going over.
I was
Mhm.
looking at the staff. Okay,
Yeah,
so here's the city manager levels. The recommendation was that up to $100,000, city manager has authority to sign contracts. And purchases up to $100,000, anything over that would come to the council. Except in an emergency, that limit would go up to $250,000. Above that would go to the council. This is as it came from the attorney. I'm not recommending anything. This is how the attorney sent it. And
Mm.
she said she based that on the construction limit of $100,000. Above that has to go to bid.
so with our track record of this town.
Mhm.
Like Ron was saying, the mayor was saying. For our safety, $50,000 is a big chunk of change for us.
Yes.
100,000 even more.
And
That could break our bank.
But here's the question that Lily had, or, today I signed a piece of paper for 267,000. I was out of commission for a couple weeks being sick, okay? We almost lost that. She wouldn't, if I didn't sign that, so there's a limit, but it was over the 250,000, which I feel this is
But isn't,
perfect for, that's $250,000.
but isn't that? In that situation, shouldn't that go right to Leah, your council president?
Yes.
Should have gone right downhill where if she could get a hold, you guys could discuss, she could have signed that amount.
Yes.
yes and no. I mean, it was one of those things that we didn't know how long the mayor was going to be out.
So
That's,
it's how they send the paperwork. Which means that Lily would write, because my name was on that.
So what I would say is with spending, $50,000 comes and goes pretty quick.
Yep.
And quite frankly, if I have to bring to the council anything over $50,000, is that make for the being efficient and effective in running the city?
No,
But you have every right to set that amount. That's the language, that's the whole point of the resolution was certain contracts in an efficient and cost-effective manner while retaining ultimate fiscal responsibility of the city council. You guys get to set that amount, whatever amount you set, just realize anything above that is coming to you. So do we need to meet more often? To do business if necessary? Do we call for special meetings if we need to get something signed, if there's something more urgent that needs to happen? Because the other thing that's not here that might be something to consider is the council pre-award the mayor to sign a contract at a certain amount without going to the council. So maybe the city manager has a level and above that, maybe there's another tier that says the council, the city manager and the mayor, or is it just straight to the council? I'm not gonna tell you what levels to put in here. Those are options that are out there. If you want everything over 50,000, that's fine. That's fine. And we can bring it to the council and, it's whatever you guys want, because right now we don't have anything. This is the criteria the state set.
Yes.
And it depends on the area. If it's goods and services, up to $250,000 is the flexibility. If it's construction, it's up to $100,000 is the flexibility. Right here, regulated personal services, architect, engineer. That one is $250,000. That's the level for that. And then, I mean, over here for exempt personal services, that's, $25,000 is the limit. So it depends on the type of spending. I would say if I were going to recommend anything, I'd say start with what the lawyer recommended. And unless you want something lower, that's fine. Because you're right, the city has some stuff.
No.
It's resolution. Resolutions can be changed fairly easily.
Mhm.
They only require 24-hour notice to be published. But absolutely, if there is a hesitation of the council, go lower. Don't err on the side of going too high. Go lower if you need.
I'm just,
Or I would say is the day I leave, set it lower.
I'm just,
That needs to be in the resolution. We'll never use it.
Just kidding.
I'm just worried that with the track record that this city's had, we need to sit there and we can always increase it.
Right.
I'm not worried about Lily. I'm worried about anybody in the future. We went through 7 city managers in 4 years, whatever it was.
Yes.
And I'm worried about somebody just sitting there having the ability to sit there and just say, here's $50,000 or $100,000 and sign into an agreement without us knowing.
Well, we could always change that later in a resolution.
But then when you change it, it's too late at that time.
That's the thing. That's my fear. We can always increase it.
You're gonna know when I leave.
Yeah.
Yes.
True. But are we gonna remember this when she leaves that we need to lower these numbers?
What can we put in this resolution for a safeguard? When you leave? Is there anything that
I
we
would
could add to
say
this?
you can add. Let me run this by, let's add this to the lawyer question, but what I would recommend is upon a change of city manager, spending limits cease until revisited by the council,
I like that.
something like that.
That's a
would be-
good safeguard.
Upon a change of a manager, the limit of spending is $10,000 or $25,000 are reviewed until, or, under review until. So when
Thank
you guys hire the new person, this can become a part of that new hiring of what is that spending limit going to be?
That. Go back to the city.
What do you mean us?
Sorry, I speak of Gold Hill now as us, so forgive me if you guys have become my home now, even though I don't sleep here. I just live here more than a normal amount of hours a day.
Was that suspended, reduced, held in abeyance?
So spending limits shall be reviewed and reaffirmed upon any change of city manager? Maybe, or something like that?
Something like that
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think that's an appropriate thing that you, or the other thing I would maybe recommend add is we're gonna look at this annually.
I would recommend that too.
So,
I mean,
It's just having those safeguards makes.
and that's what I'm looking, I'm trying to
Gives me
figure
a
out
warm
what to
fuzzy.
do as a council now that's gonna
Yep.
affect, kind of like you were saying. What happens in 2 years when the council changes over
Exactly.
and Ron's not here and something happens to Lily and she has to go somewhere else and what happens when to trigger this stuff to protect us as a city?
so yeah, let's send that back to the attorney with a recommendation of what do you think of this language? Would that be all right? Cause,
Yeah.
cause you're absolutely right. What I said at the beginning is we need to do what's best for the city, not based on the person here.
Yes.
And I could be trustworthy, but you know what the attorney said to me? She goes, cause I asked her, I said, what do I do about these spending limits when the council asked me? Cause they're gonna ask me about the spending limits. She goes, well, I don't know you from anybody. I heard you're trustworthy, but I don't know you. So I recommended these levels because they're kind of general out there and because of this other one. Great. She goes, but they can be higher, it can be lower based on what your council wants. So great, let's set some provisions in there. It has to be revisited annually. And that if there's a change on a city manager, that spending above a certain amount is frozen until the policy's revisited or something like that. I mean, there's,
And that's why when you were showing that bullet of the different spending limits, I was looking at the basic ones for not sending something out for bid. Was it 25,000, 25,000, 100,000? You know what I mean? And I was looking at those and that's why I was looking at the numbers here and kind of in my head, trying to find an in-between line. Because if it's 25,000 and it needs to get done, you have that authority. If it's over 50, we might want to bring that to us. Consider and
but I'm gonna go back, sorry, I interrupted you. I was just gonna say on the levels though of it's up to $250,000 though, that
Yes.
on that other one, right? So, and quite frankly, it requires you to get 3 oral or written quotes. There are definitely things that it's like, hey, I got 3 quotes and this was the best quote for what we got. But maybe 250,000 isn't the right number, right? For goods and services. But I can tell you that under those exemptions, there's gonna be some stuff coming up in our utilities that I'm gonna need to be able to pay some bills with what was awarded under our budgeted amount under the Senate Bill 1530. We're getting some final costs of some of the repairs of the water treatment plant. And it will be a lot. So do we, when we look at this, I mean, it's like,
so that brings another question to my mind when dealing with grants. Does this spending limit also apply to those grant funds that you use?
yes.
Yes.
I don't, that makes me want to go higher because when you're using grant funds, usually like when I'm working with the city of Medford, they don't take, once a grant is awarded, that money came for my program, that came to me, that 1.4 million, that came to Habitat with me. And I manage those funds. And then I submitted those costs back to the city for reimbursement, which those reimbursements did get approved by the city council.
I will bring the bid award to the council for the water line replacement. That's a big contract. That's coming back to the council. But there are some portions that we've already gone through some hoops as a council to approve the sole source procurement for Southern Oregon Water Tech and the subcontractors. And some of the stuff that we're doing down there is some repairs in place. And the parts are expensive for the purchasing, but the labor's not necessarily, but it falls under the exemption that was asked to be added in there for the utility for that kind of stuff. So the potential is I don't have to go to bid, but I'd have to bring it to council because of the dollar amount. I always hope for more accountability. But based on those individual bills, I don't know how much they will be. And based on the limit that you give me, I will need to bring it back to you guys no matter what. If it's, I mean, I have a feeling that there's a portion that the parts are gonna be over $100,000. I don't know what those levels are. If they, are they gonna bill me individually? Is it like, oh, we're gonna have to order some of that stuff, but this is stuff that's been in progress for a while. And yes, it was, well, it'd probably be appropriate for, I'm gonna know more when I get the bid back soon. And hopefully before we adopt this, so I can tell you where we're at with it, because I've been begging for an update. How much is that gonna cost? Can we move forward? Do we have enough money to do that? Because the next step is big of those repairs down there. And I'm also hoping that what the other one costs isn't so exorbitant that it pushes the other projects out the door and we won't be able to get them done. So, I don't know more right now. I want to make sure that I'm bringing as much to you guys as possible, as often as possible. I also want to be able to get the work done. And so it needs to be something that you guys are comfortable with. And that there's a mechanism of, does that mean you add a clause about a previous awarded a grant for this and such? I mean, they're putting in the utility stuff as an exemption, but I don't have the exemption because of the spending limit. So, I don't know the right answer. This is a hard one, but I will say that you each bring different experience to the table of what you think is appropriate. And I'm going to follow your guidance because that's what I'm supposed to do.
And what I'm thinking on, like, when you're doing those purchases for like water line, most of that stuff we should have accounts set up for, so that way it would be on a rotating at 30 or 60 on payment of those. It's not payment on parts.
So the water line replacement is going out to bid. It's going to be a total thing that as those individual costs
Right.
come in, that bid will be approved by the council. I'm going to recommend when that does, that you put something in it that says I can just pay the bills as they come in according to that bill. So it kind of be outside of this, I think. Because you've previously, you're giving me that authority in that one, and I'm going to have to pay the bills according to what the bid is. But it's up to the council on how you'd want that to be done. Now, let's see.
I'm really not trying to make it hard on it, but I'm just trying to get us to all think just think about what's going on, what's happening.
Would you consider starting with the levels that are there that the attorney sent? And let's see how it goes. Because it's a professional who's done this for other cities.
Mhm.
I don't have enough experience to say it should be more or less. And that way it gives us a chance to kind of figure out where to go. And I think it's defensible with the limit she put in as a reasonable amount. If you would like it less, that's okay too. I wouldn't go more without taking it back to the attorney and saying, what do you think about this amount?
So you're gonna want a motion? Keep
No.
these the
Not
way they
tonight.
are?
No,
Nope.
no, this is an informational meeting.
Okay,
Well, remember, you're voting on this on February 4th.
okay.
So we can change it at that time too if you want. But I was hoping to give guidelines I can send back to the attorney. And remember, our goal tonight was question gathering that we can send to the attorney and ask. So maybe you say, we want to give this amount without informing the council until, because we're going to be doing regular financial reports anyhow. That's a separate policy
Mhm.
that we're going to do that. But if you, up to this amount, an email will suffice. Or something like that. I don't know. We can ask that question of the attorney. What I feel the most comfortable with is going with what she recommends so that I don't lead you astray. But we can certainly ask as many questions of her as you like, that we can get that information back to you. And we can change it that night, because this is again a resolution.
Mhm.
So I can't. If we adopt these numbers, I can't spend more than $100,000. So it's not, it's not noticing you. I can't do it.
I was thinking noticing of anything over 50. That's fine.
So,
What I'm hearing is that these numbers here were put in by the attorney. They're a safeguard. Okay? That's what they recommend. However, Lily has always let us know what she's spending. No, she's not. We're looking at the future.
saying is that if you want me to notify you of spending over $100,000, you would need to change this amount to be above $100,000 to say not exceeding 100,000 or, $100,000, not, but with notice up to $125,000 or $150,000 or something like that. So it's still less than the cap. Or is it, I heard Joe say, anything over $50,000, he wants you guys to be notified. And, but I, according to this, can spend up to $100,000. So the parameters that you guys want to be notified. Should we ask the attorney about those kinds of levels? Would that be an appropriate question to ask?
That's kind of where I was going with it. That's,
Do you want to say an amount not exceeding something for goods and services? Cause that's the $250,000 one.
Right.
Or $100,000 for construction, so we're within that bound, so you could add the. Or, I mean, do you want to ask her about the types to be separate?
I'm looking at the services too. Contract, we're all gonna see that down to the lower half then. Services is just gonna be something that buying goods.
With that money.
Yeah. Just like that,
So if goods and services, which does not have to go to an RFP until over $250,000. What level? Is it,
I like the $100,000. I think you're gonna run.
well, that's what this says though, is $100,000. So you're saying do what the lawyer recommended. That's across the board is 100,000.
Yes.
If you want goods and services to be more, you can say. You can spend up to this amount, but notice has to be given to the entire council. At this level, but the easiest thing would be just, I mean, don't go higher. If you want it less, that's your prerogative too. Sorry, guys. I know we're going, we'll ask the questions of the attorney. We'll get back to you. do we want to leave it at the 100,000 for the next meeting? If you want to change it at that time after you get feedback from the attorney, you can. If she recommends other wording based on that. What I could do is call each of you individually and say this is, or share the email and then talk to you individually beforehand so that the wording we bring back in the resolution reflects the feedback. Would you want that? No
No,
vote
no,
tonight.
no, not
This
tonight.
is just a guidance. It,
The amount.
you can take a
You can
poll.
raise your hand. So I'm gonna see a show of hands if everybody's okay.
That has been answered
I'm sorry.
here, whatever, the other staff authority, you were saying how, that's gonna be reworded. Or-
We recommended taking that out, that staff
Yes.
cannot enter into contract.
that-
I think I'm wrong.
No,
Well,
not leave it or redo it and give staff a certain amount.
how does section 4 read? Purchases of goods from city employees.
But
I know, I'm trying to decide if purchasing,
In the city,
is section 4 contracts with employees, purchases of goods from city employees?
That's 5 now.
Yeah.
The other staff authorities is what we're looking at, section.
I'm gonna ask the attorney, is there language here that gives the city manager ability to set staff a purchasing ability limit? Out, but no contract signing, but just purchase up to a certain amount.
it should be done by card, credit card.
Yes.
City credit card only.
Well, I'll give you, there's some things that happen. We just had a $600 repair of our chipper. We got the quote, we prepared a check and sent Fred out the door with the check.
That's fine.
There is absolutely a trail.
Fine.
Do you have a number in mind that you would want staff limited in spending to?
500 in my mind.
I would like it just to read, and this is just a recommendation. Council. On approval of the city manager. Period. I know, so that's my point. That's my point. Just take out the amount. It has to be approved by the city manager. Well, she knows, she's not gonna go $1,500. I doubt that. But like she said, she wrote a check for $600. Fred went out the door and paid for that. Okay. so
And it
there's-
was technically me purchasing it, right?
And that was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we sign the checks. I don't sign a loan. Yeah.
Mhm.
The number that comes to mind, I wouldn't want it above $250, but even that's,
I don't think there should be an amount
I
in
think
there.
that, I don't think the amount should be there. I think it's designated by the,
Exactly.
designated by the city manager.
Okay, done.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I think her recommendation was taking out the two highlighted in yellows, but I'm gonna just verify with her the wording that do we need something in there designating that the city manager can delegate staff can make purchases as, or something like, does it need to be in here, or is this next part? Cause I'm reading the written section 4 portion. Is that city employees are selling the goods, purchases of goods from city employees.
I say get rid of that section too.
I just need clarification on what that means.
Yes.
Cause I can't,
Why are we buying anything?
Girl
correct,
Scout food.
versus, no. But I'm wondering, is that meant to say purchases of goods by city employees shall be required?
Mhm.
And that would fix that whole section. If purchases of goods by city employees shall require prior written authorization of the city manager or designee, that would maybe fix that section for me.
Actually, that would take care of, if you got rid of three,
And,
Yep.
and that would set you up for having credit card limit of.
Yep, and then that gets rid of section,
Can't spend over $1,000 a month. period,
yes.
Yeah.
on
if,
Your card.
if that was worded that way, then the two highlighted sections can go away. And then that,
Trying to get,
yeah,
Yes.
and that makes sense, because if I'm gone long enough that I set a designee per the charter, they have the authority to sign on my behalf per that charter already.
Mhm.
This policy would also support that, that if all right, I'm giving so-and-so designation to sign on my behalf while I'm gone, they're acting city manager while I'm gone, that kind of thing. Then they could sign if something were to come up in those limits or something like that, so, all right.
Okay, now,
With the
back to
main
my
head, of
question.
course,
Can I see a show of hands that likes the numbers? That's already in this contract, or already in this resolution. There you go.
okay,
So.
Still 25.
no, no, we
already
got
covered
through.
that.
So then I think we're done with the stuff that was in the workshop.
Let me find the meeting agenda again. Here we are. Okay, do I have any questions at this time? Council. Great. Reports from counselors.
I have one, but I want to save it for next Tuesday, or the next meeting. I have
Okay.
a little bit.
All right, Malia?
So MRMPO was canceled this month.
Can you pull that? Oh, I meant to tell y'all. When you're talking into your mic, if you can't hear yourself on a speaker, then in TV land and in the audience, they can't hear you either. So make sure you're hearing yourself in the speaker, then you know you're getting picked up.
I'll start over. So MRMPO, Middle Road Metropolitan Planning Organization, usually meets monthly. Did not meet this month because there wasn't a lot on the agenda, but Rogue Valley Area Commission on Transportation did meet. Nothing much new there, but except bridge is still proceeding, plans for the bridge. When we talked at the last meeting about the liaison assignments, we forgot to mention the liaison to Can Do, so I just wanted to mention that I'm willing to continue to be the liaison to Can Do. And at their latest meeting, I just wanted to give you some stuff to put on your calendars. Yarding in the Hill will be on May 10th, Saturday. Gold Hill Cleanup Day is May 17th. Gold Dust Day will be June 7th, first Saturday in June as always. And remember that that's a 130-year anniversary, so there'll be some special stuff going on around that. And then on the 4th of July, they're planning a barbecue. And then after that, it goes back around to Christmas stuff. Just wanted to mention those dates.
Malia, just to give you information, Can Do's never had it's on in the 10 years that I've been here.
I was appointed last year.
I didn't appoint you. That's not part of my committees.
Well, it was. It was.
I don't know if it was a
Oh.
formal or informal in.
It hasn't been informal because I didn't know anything about it. I knew you were part of Can Do and we asked you.
I was definitely appointed liaison at some point because they were surprised when it didn't come up again this year when we were talking about liaisons.
Okay, we'll visit that because, and I don't have a problem with it. I just need to know that that wasn't part of our committees. Yeah.
It's not an official city committee, but
No.
there are other things that we have liaisons to, and I think that with the working relationship we have with Can Do, it's not a bad thing. It would,
Well, I agree. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to step on toes and I don't want to offend anybody.
so I can put it back on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And then we can make sure that we formally did that. So forgive me for the oversight. I should not have missed that.
Oh, you're fired.
Okay, dang it. You're revisiting.
I'll go
my
home and
notes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're rehired. Anyway, I just have Harvey Con tomorrow, so, a question, Lily, can I take this and use this as a? They always ask,
Sure.
and I'm just like, okay, well, this is what we covered and blah,
Mr.
blah.
Mayor, you are welcome to present on whatever you want. You want the agenda for the last meeting too?
Yeah,
So you can
and the
see all the stuff that you've done.
So, okay, city manager reports.
Hey, we're all waiting patiently. Set us up.
A few months ago, well, almost a year ago, we applied for a grant for $20,000 to do a water rate study and SDC study. They were going through staff getting reports back and forth, but we found so much inconsistency with our water rates and consumption. And in September, I learned that staff had been adjusting people's consumption. If they had high stuff, they would just lower it, or if something didn't, they just lower it. So there's a lot of accounts that haven't been being charged for their consumption. But today, we were able to confirm that even though in 2023, the council adopted a new uniform fee and processing of doing a tiered rate structure for our water, we haven't been charging it. And no wonder we don't have the revenue that we need to get things done, but we've been able to determine that 9 customers have been paying the tiered approach. 400 some have not been. And it should have been done in the system a couple years ago. And it was an email brought to our attention on January 14th that there's some anomalies in our rates. The other question, and so we're going to be bringing this back to you guys to look at in general. But we're going to be getting that fixed. So people are actually judged on usage according to what was adopted by the council 2 years ago and reaffirmed at the end of last year. But the system hasn't been showing that. So people have been paying a flat rate. And so we've missed out on a lot of revenue because it wasn't entered in the system correctly.
When you say a lot of revenue, do you have an amount?
No. No, I mean, we've lost revenue because they were adjusting rates. Before that, there was an employee that wasn't reading meters and just kind of, so people were just paying a flat rate for the longest time. So, one of the things that we've been doing with is let the readings be the readings. Let's fix the meters if they're broke. But if there's something wrong, let's find out why. And what we learned is people had leaks going on them properties that were going undetected because instead of determining why the meter reading was so high, they just adjusted it saying, oh, that's got to be wrong. And that wasn't the right answer. So we've got, with Mallory having been running the bills for the last couple months, we've instead been making a list of, okay, we didn't get any reads on the meter. Why? Okay, the house isn't occupied. Okay, that's going on there. Okay, that, no, it's a broken meter. Okay, let's go get it fixed. There's just all this stuff going on, but there's a tiered approach that hasn't been being followed. And the commercial, for whatever reason, isn't tiered. So only the residential is. And so that's interesting. So anyhow, I need to bring that to your attention. We got confirmation today through the software people. So we got the email on the 14th. We sent in response, because it wasn't just the residential, there was some weird anomalies with some other accounts. And so the question we had is, what's the size of the meter? So we went out and re-verified each meter's serial number, size, how it's being read, just to make sure. And we got that back to the engineer so they could evaluate that. And how do you make a recommendation on when your rates are supposed to be when we're not even charging the rates we said we were going to be doing for the last 2 years? And yes, it was our Mallory got them the reports of our consumption for the last 3 months, and the engineer's office came back and said, here's the anomalies we found. And so, and today we had a meeting with the finance software folks to verify the meter stuff. And so getting that fixed as well. So, then there was another piece of it. It's just, I apologize. It's been discouraging sometimes to find some of this stuff and you think you just make it around the corner and then there's something else and you make it around the corner, there's something else. We're not going to give up. I'm really super pleased with our staff right now and how hard they're working and taking care of this and doing it right. But it is one of those things that, you want to be able to say that what you see is what you get and all that other kind of stuff. We are also, the other thing I need to report to you is that, at this point, I believe it's time for us to bring our billing in-house for mailing the utility bills. I am considering doing what RVSS did and maybe looking at the cost of doing a postcard bill as well. But right now, if I keep it doing what we're doing, to print in-house, we need to buy the envelopes with the window envelopes. We have to buy perforated paper. We have to print, then fold and stuff, and then pay for the postage and get those mailed out. So the January bills that covered December's usage, we got done and sent off to the company December 31st. They had it by December 31st. We had people coming in today paying the bill saying, I still haven't received my bill or I got it today. It's absolutely absurd. And we're doing everything we can to get them out the door because we've been holding people accountable to you owe the bill. And so the recommendation was per our code until we get it updated and all that kind of stuff is the code says, well, before it said the bill was due the day it's mailed. We changed that to the 20th, and this was the first month it said it was due the 20th. So we're answering a lot of those questions as it's transitioning. But it says it's delinquent 10 days after. So what we set up to do is, okay, your bill's going to go out on the 1st. You should be able to get that. You got to get it paid by the 20th. On the 21st, we're sending out delinquent notices. And then 10 days after, you're getting your late fee. And 10 days later, you got your shut off notice. 5 days later, you're shut off and getting that schedule going that we're holding accountable to get things done. Well, how do you do it when they don't even get their bill in time? And yet I went down and met with the postmaster and they said 2-3 days, we can get mail to Portland and back. At the most 6 days at the worst of the height of stuff. The company that prints our bills is in Portland. Why? They're already there. Why is it taking 22 days to get it back down to us? And granted, yeah, there was 2 holidays in there, New Year's and Martin Luther King Day, but they had it a day early because we knew about the holidays. We intentionally read it and worked it all out that would be out the door on the 31st. And yet we have people that came in and paid and said, I hadn't got my bill yet. And others that came in today and say, I got it today. So it's time for me to change something. I know people like the printed newsletter. There's just going to be some different costs. Are we paying somebody else to do it? Or are we doing it in-house? So we're going to have to determine that. I'm looking at, do we get an actual permit number that we print on the envelopes and that it just charges us the postage, or do we get a postage machine like Rogue River has and we run it through and it seals them and it stamps them for us? It's going to be staff time. I also was going to try to look into a local printer that can maybe do it for us. But it's because it's individualized per account. I'm hesitant to send that out to somebody else. So it looks like we're going to bring it in house and then either I pay for a postcard to be printed that has, we run the postage on that, or it's buying envelopes, buying paper, printing them, folding them, stuffing them, sealing them, and all that other kind of stuff. So based on the cost, people were upset when RVSS went to postcard. We have people all the time that come down, give me an envelope so I can pay RVSS. And they're not happy about it. I get it. People, but you know how many other people come in and they're like, they don't even use that same envelope. They just kind of tear off the bottom and attach it to a paper clip and toss it in the box, you know, kind of thing. And so we get things all over. 100 or so people are on automatic pay. So we have kind of a whole thing. Ultimately, my goal would be to put the newsletter just on the website. People can subscribe to the email and get email notification that a new newsletter is up. Most of the stuff that would have been on the newsletter for people to know about January's come and gone and they haven't even got the bill yet. So if we're trying to do this to retain, I know we have clients that don't have email. I know that too. So,
Is there any way we could give an incentive to people to go paperless? And I know it costs more now. I mean, it's not, doesn't cost more to go paperless, but it costs $3 more to pay online.
well,
Which we, agree
I
on.
would.
I understand that. The reason for that makes sense.
At my home with my utility company, which I know is not in Gold Hill yet, Mr. Mayor, I know. I get notified when a new bill comes and I ended up setting myself up for auto pay because I just didn't want to have to think about it. And I did set it up through my checking account, not a card, but my checking account and I pay that way.
And we can do that too.
I could say is, what if we did a tiered approach that if somebody was on auto pay and paid with a checking account versus a card, we could come back and say, do we incentivize by saying the city covers that cost, that fee? That's $1.95 a person, flat. It's 3% that we're charged for the cards. And that's, I mean, we've lost hundreds of dollars through covering people's expenses and we changed that, you guys changed that policy last year. The council can do whatever, but what I can tell you is we are not covering our expenses right now. With what we're bringing in and billing and our water is not paying the bills. And that's why we were doing the water rate study in the first place. But we're not even done with the water rate study and we realized we haven't even been charged what we're supposed to be charging.
Yeah, I was just commenting on reducing paper and reducing staff time to having and
Yeah,
postage, you know, to mailing out a paper bill. You can sign up to, like, I'm paperless, so I get an email that says, here's your bill. I get my.
yeah.
And so you don't have to send a bill out to me. You don't sit.
Well,
nothing
what
like
does
that.
it save us? It saves us 55 cents in postage.
Plus the staff time, if you're talking about bringing it back in-house.
Yeah, but right now I'd have to see how many we're mailing out because I don't know how many people aren't.
Hmm.
And right now we're paying between $400 and $500 a month to have a third party do it. So, and
300 bills, 300.
no, it's over 400. But, because I think there's 570 water accounts, something about that. And over 400 are getting a paper bill.
You're at $6,600 right there a year. That's
By
chunk of
having a
change.
third party send out our bills.
Why we need an incentive.
Yeah.
But we could also send out a postcard
Mhm.
and say, submit your payment on the website here. Or come in person and pay it.
An
And,
envelope, buy your own envelope.
and,
Right.
yeah,
Exactly. It doesn't matter. My wife still puts it in an envelope and a stamp on it and I drop it off here. I'm trying to get her to break that.
so
Anchor stamps.
I want, those are two big things that we dealt with today. So guess what, council, you're making huge strides. You guys are different than past councils, working together as a team. Taking on things, you're not all from the same belief system or philosophy on different things or politics. And what I have seen you guys accomplish in the last year is huge. And it is discouraging. I have to say, a couple of you have heard me gripe because it finally got to me and I there's other stuff going on with some stuff and I had someone in my office today and said, I just want to cry. I've done that a lot since I've come to work here for different reasons. I've cried. But don't give up. We're gonna find a solution. But promised I would always share this information with you guys and be public about it. And these are two things that came up today that my current staff did not create. And we're trying to find the solutions for.
Who was the company that? Who was the company that we?
Only if you bring that microphone closer so the public can hear you.
I can't hear him either.
Who was the company that was putting the water bills out? Like 3 years ago or 2 years ago, do you know?
No,
Anybody remember?
no. I don't remember.
I can tell you that, right now, this is somebody contracted through our software people. And they started to tell me, well, seasonal in Portland and the weather and blah, blah. I said, nope. All summer, I've been hearing these complaints. I'm over it. It's been enough. I've been looking at other options. And so we're trying to get, we don't even have the ability to print in-house. We're trying to get that ability. But if I need it to say I want it to be, I have to pay to program if I want it to be a postcard. And just, I mean, then I don't have to buy envelopes to stuff. I don't have to fold. I don't have to do anything. We print them out on the postcards and we run them through the mailing machine, or in the design, we pay for the permit that's already on there and we just take the whole pack down to the post office and they do it for us and they give us a bill based on how many we sent. That would be the simplest thing. But is that what our public wants? I can't say that. That might be something worth finding out from talking to folks. But are we sending them just for a newsletter? Because Can Do really likes the newsletter and they give us information. But every page that we print extra is extra money. Can Do does every once in a while give money to help cover half that cost of the newsletter when they give us stuff. But if it's not getting to people till after it's over, what's the point? I mean, now we do upload on the website right now. When the newsletter goes out, it's uploaded on the website. And so it's there. And people can sign up for the newsletter to get an electronic notification saying there's a new one on the website. Go to the website and look at it. So council, we sent out some dates today to consider February 1st, 8th, or 15th. Please only hit reply. Do not hit reply all, please. And we're going to collate that decision on when to do that. They're all 3 Saturdays. We could spend a couple hours together and kind of just talk about some goals and stuff. Efficiency of how the governance is going to me is a high priority. And so, you know, there's at some level of, if I make a change like this and change the bills, and one, if we print it in-house, I know we can get them to people sooner. But if we do a postcard or not, I think your emails will be blown up. I think you'll be getting phone calls or Facebook posts or something else like that. And so I try to make sure that if something like that's going to be such a big impact, that you have a chance to think on it and weigh in and see what people are thinking. Maybe that's a conversation we have at goal setting, say, what do you want us to do? But sticking with a third party that's taking this long is not going to cut it. But we're jumping through the hoops of, we tried to download the bills today so we could print out like the delinquent notices to send them out. We wanted to send those out today. But the formatting was off and it requires us to get that fixed through the company. So it's not quite there yet, but we're moving that way because what just happened this month is ridiculous.
Anything for the good of the order? Okay, Malia?
In the 4.5 years I've been sitting up here, one of the things that really has been frustrating to me the entire time is our inability to get minutes. And I just want to tip my hat to Michelle because that stack of minutes is quite a lot of work and you've brought us up to date.
Yay.
I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed. Thank you very much. Good job.
Anything else, councilors? This meeting is adjourned.